I'm going to go through the player's handbook one by one in each class and share either a funny story or my thoughts about the class in general, maybe a little bit of both, and that's what we're ready for right now. What is this? I don't know. One of the cool things about wizards and all the spellcasters really is when you think about it, there's three things that every spellcaster uses as a tool. There's spell components, I guess, but you can always use a focus, right? An arcane or a divine focus. That was something cool that they added in 5th edition. You don't necessarily have to have like the little bits and bobs, but with a wizard, that's one of the fun things to do, is like you pull out, a dead spider carapace, or a piece of web or a feather or a rock or whatever it happens to be, the components of your spell. And there's three things. There's verbal, somatic, and material components. So verbal is obvious. You speak the words of the spell. Somatic is just hand gestures. That's kind of what I was doing. And one of the cool things about hand gestures, well, I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the last thing, of course, verbal, somatic, and material. Material being the little pieces and stuff. But of course, the spellcasting focus can take place of all that stuff. One of the cool things, let's think about the wizard in a broader perspective. Okay, so the wizard, originally you had the magic user. It was just a magic user. It was only one class, right? Or the mage is another way people might refer to it. Now in 5th edition and earlier, but mostly now in 5th edition is what I'm talking about, you have the wizard. The wizard is the fundamental, they are the book-learned, well-studied magic user, the caster. Now, one of the cool things about this, and I love to use some modern versions of characters to give a perception of. So, if you're familiar with the Marvel Universe, if you've seen the movies, if you've ever been confused about what the heck does somatic mean, so what's a somatic component, the Marvel Universe's rendition of how Doctor Strange casts his spells is a perfect example. He and the other group of, whatever. I don't know that much about Doctor Strange. I like the character, but I don't know his backstory and all that kind of stuff. I don't know a ton about him, and I don't know the organization he's part of. However, what I like is when he did, or one of the others did, their somatic movements, their hand movements. It's like they're painting pictures in the air. And on a certain level, in D&D, we can imagine that that's what our wizards are doing. That's what our sorcerers, whatever, that's what our spellcasters are doing when they're casting their somatic components of their spells. I love wizards. Wizards are super fun. They're one thing that I always will go back to because they've always been that spellcaster that when you get to the high levels especially, man, can you dish out the damage. And not only that, you start to get to the point where you can manipulate time and you can manipulate reality. And wizards are, it can be argued that wizards are the most powerful class in the game. Whether or not that's true, that's not what I'm here to discuss. It's just something to think about. They could be argued as being the most powerful class in the game. One thing you gotta remember when you're playing a wizard is you don't have a lot of hit points. And that's always tricky. So you tend to be very squishy, and you tend to be, need protection on a certain level. That's only true to a point, and that doesn't need to be played out in your wizard. One of the cool things about the wizard is that even at low level, you have lots of spells that you can pick from. So here's a trap that I want to help you avoid as being a wizard. And again, this actually applies to most of the magic casters. I think it applies most to the wizard. I want to recommend that one thing you avoid and one thing that you do. The one thing you avoid is backing yourself into a corner. If it's a character choice, that's cool. And what I mean by backing yourself into a corner is, if you take a wizard and you only choose spells that do damage, or damage of a certain type, you can find yourself in a pickle very easily. What I mean by that is, like, if the only kind of damage you're capable of doing is fire damage, as soon as you find someone that's resistant, or even worse, immune to fire, what are you going to do? I mean, you're kind of out of luck on a certain level. So that's what to avoid. Avoid backing yourself into a corner where your spells are so focused and so limited, you don't have options when you need them. The other thing you want to do, so that was my recommendation of what to avoid. My recommendation of what I suggest is think with versatility in mind. Think versatilely. That doesn't mean you have to be a support class. If you want to be a damage dealer, be a damage dealer. Think about things like one of the best spells, in my opinion, in the book, Chromatic Orb. Chromatic Orb is a cool spell. You create a softball-sized ball of energy, and that energy can be whatever you choose. It can be force, it can be fire, it can be a lightning, it can be, you get the point, right? You can make it whatever you want. That's awesome. So I always recommend for wizards, think of versatility, and also think of versatility in being able to do things like great spells. There's so many great spells out there. Message and knock and featherfall and all these other utility spells. So pick spells that you love to do damage for fun. Fireball. I mean, come on. Almost every wizard or sorcerer wants Fireball. It's one of the fun things to do if you're a spellcaster, of course. Doesn't mean you have to. But what I'm saying is, pick the spells you want for your damage dealing, and just remember to pick a few spells that are also utility spells that help you solve problems, get around certain obstacles. Those spells in your role playing sometimes can be the most fun and the most entertaining and interesting. So keep that in mind. Make your Gandalf, make your Merlin, make your Doctor Strange, or whatever you happen to make as your wizard. And keep in mind that wizards can be one of the most fun classes in this game of D&D, and they can also be one of the most versatile and useful classes because they can do so darn much with their magic. So keep that in mind as you build it. Thank you for being a part of this adventure. With Wizard, we've kind of come to the end. I went through the Player's Handbook here with all of the classes from the Player's Handbook. We went all the way from the beginning with Barbarian, all the way through Wizard. I hope you enjoyed this mini-series. Thank you for being along for the ride. I hope to see you at a table someday. And until then, keep rolling 20s, and remember, it's your game, play your way.